Well, Eric, we've got a good intimate group. Should we get started?
Yeah, thanks, Barton. So for those that don't know me, my name is Eric Lever. I am a customer success manager here at Blackbaud. I've been here for about 7 years, and I work primarily with our nonprofit customers. And I have a bunch that have Financial Edge and Razor's Edge, and I've been doing really fun things with the APIs, and some are starting to also get into playing with the Power Platform. And so I'm really excited to hear from Barton, of course, but also to hear from all of you about, what are you doing? How are you playing in this space? How are you thinking about leveraging these tools that we're getting, making available? So really want to make this interactive. If you have questions, feel free to take yourself off of mute. Feel free to share your video, or if you just want to put stuff in chat. If you were zoomed out for the day, I know we're in the home stretch here, so do what makes you guys all feel comfortable, but really want to make sure that we make this as inclusive as possible to make sure you get the most out of the session. So with that, I'll pass it over to Barton.
All right, thank you so much. And I was telling Eric just a moment ago, what we're really going to discuss applies to much more than Financial Edge. It could really apply to any endpoint, so to speak, that's missing from the published connectors within what Blackbaud provides to folks for their Sky APIs. But I've got a set of slides I'm going to run us through, and if I can, just for bandwidth purposes, I'm gonna stop my video and click on share, and we're going to start out within a quick PowerPoint. And so we're going to run through some slides, and then I'm going to show you some examples of how this can be accomplished. But quick introduction, I'm Barton Dyson. I was with Blackbaud for 20 plus years, and among other roles, I was part of the design team for Financial Edge when we rolled out Financial Edge version 7, which is essentially the database view of Financial Edge NXT at this point, the precursor to NXT. So that's my background. A few years ago, I started a company called npAutomate. We focus on process automation, and about 95% of our work is dedicated to Blackbaud customers. So we help empower and enable nonprofits to get more out of their systems and integrate systems together, either in reporting or process automation, or helping them do really complex allocations related to grants or anything else. And so I'm excited about this topic today because before we had this capability in Power Automate, before we had this ability to just connect to any of these components to push or pull data out of Financial Edge, we were required to build what's called a custom connector. And this was really the genesis of our company. We developed one of these for Financial Edge and started putting it in place for different customers so they could push and pull data and do other things. But it was something we had to configure, and it was somewhat challenging to, for someone to try to do it on their own. And then you had to go and really create a connection over to in the developer portal to connect it back to your environment through the marketplace. So there was just a lot of steps involved in making it happen. And now it just operates like any other connector does that's published by Blackbaud. And so if any of you have both Razor's Edge and Financial Edge, for example, you'll know you can just go get a list of constituents or pull up information like an address for a constituent because that's published. What this does is gives us access to everything. It just requires a little more learning in terms of understanding how to get to these items. As I mentioned before, this doesn't just apply to Financial Edge. In this bottom right corner down here, we use it for populating data warehouses to get not only Financial Edge data, but getting all custom fields from Financial Edge, or all constituent codes, or all relationships, which isn't a published connection. You can get one custom, you can get custom fields for one constituent, but not for all. So a big win when Blackbaud added this component within the last year, and we've moved all of our customers over to it that we've implemented. It's just a much better, and I honestly think a more secure way to allow for the connections. So with that, let me try to move to my next screen. If I can get this to update. There we go. Sometimes this will freeze on you in Zoom. So step one, we need to allow access through the Blackbaud marketplace. So this is a misnomer here where it says this Microsoft Power Platform connection allows you to connect to Razor's Edge NXT and church management. That applied before they added this extra capability. Now it's connect to any Sky API endpoint that Blackbaud has published. So the first thing you want to do is go into your Financial Edge environment, go to the marketplace, and currently I think you need environment admin rights to do this, but you want to connect the Microsoft Power Platform to your Financial Edge. And that will be the first step in getting this to connect. The next thing you want to do is go into Power Automate. I'm going to show you some examples of this in a moment. And instead of typing in Razor's Edge or something like that in the search, you just want to type Blackbaud. And one of the options that will pop up for you is the Blackbaud Sky add-ins. And then the action we want to use is very simply called send an HTTP request. And that's going to give us the ability to pull information, push information, adjust information, or even delete information, even though we very rarely use the delete function with Financial Edge, if at all. I haven't really seen a lot of good business cases to do that. The very first time you connect to it, after you've already allowed your system to connect to that environment within the marketplace, the system will ask you to log in. And so you'll log in, or if you're already logged in, it'll just connect and make sure it's okay to connect the two. And that completes the authentication. Nothing else to do. And you can add it 5 more times for other pieces you want to interact with. And you're good to go. You only have to do that the first time to create that connection within Power Automate, within that flow or any other flow. Today, we're going to walk through some examples of working with projects and pulling projects and creating a project. So you'll see a little more of how that works. The next thing you want to do is determine what it is you want to interact with. Do we want to pull vendors? Do we want to update a vendor? Do we want to pull invoices or get projects or accounts? We use this for everything from helping to do analysis and run through maybe an approval process that we're emailing out to different users, and then taking that result and updating an existing record, all the way to things like getting data to a data warehouse for reporting, so we can do a lot of BI reporting and other analysis for internal stakeholders, for the board or anyone else. So, a lot of times our organization will help get our team will help get companies started on this process, and they can take it and do it on their own once we have some building blocks in place. But today we want to show you really some tips on how to do it on your own. I did not get this PowerPoint updated or uploaded to the meeting in time, but I did just put it before the meeting in Expo Room 2. So if you'd like to capture these slides, you don't need to do screenshots. You can just jump to Expo Room 2 anytime between now and the end of the conference and just download a PDF version of these slides that'll walk you through these steps. Also, feel free to email me. I'll show you my email address at the end, and I'm happy to send it to you. So the next thing we want to do is just figure out what piece you want to interact with. And then what do we want to do? Do we want to get information? Do we want to create information, which is post? Do we want to patch information, which is update? There is currently an issue with this connector where the patch does not work, and Blackbaud has filed a case with Microsoft, and it should be resolved pretty quickly. But today I'm going to show you examples of get and post. So getting data and creating data, getting project information, creating a project. But patch will be working soon. The put option, I think there may be other Blackbaud systems where this is useful, but it's not used with Financial Edge or Razor's Edge. So you're either getting stuff out, you're posting by creating new stuff, you're patching, which is updating something that already exists, or you're deleting. Then what you want to do is you want to get over to developer.blackbaud.com, and that's where all the endpoints are listed anyway of what you want to work with. In just a second, I'm going to show you a screen share of interacting with the project record. And so you want to start by going to API endpoints, going to Financial Edge, and find the project section within General Ledger. And that's what we're going to be getting, so to speak. You'll see the word get up here beside it. There's also create project or get a project as opposed to get project search to get a bunch of projects. And that's going to give you the path that you need to insert into this next section of the get project section, or of any send HTTP command. You'll see I renamed it to say get projects. And so you just want to post everything that comes after the blackbaud.com section, and the little descriptor within Power Automate will even tell you that. It's like, hey, put everything after that and just paste it in. And then all these little request parameters that are listed here, you can actually utilize and push into this if you want to be very specific to only see certain projects or only see certain types or only certain vendors that have been created in the last 3 months, for example, or any other components. It's really useful to use the try it button within the developer console. First, you do need to go to the marketplace within your system and allow access to the Sky API console. But try it is a really nice way, especially when you're trying to create a record, to see what the body is that you need to actually push into that record in the format it needs to be in. So this will help create it for you. But you can always test it here to make sure you're getting the right result, authenticate against your system, and then use that to add any parameters you want to put into the search. Because within projects, these are all the parameters. We can say, I only want to have a limit of 100 records, or I only want to have projects within a specific division or within a specific department, for example. So these are the parameters, or quote filters, we can use to determine what we're getting to. So for gets, when you're getting information, you don't have to worry about the header. Traditionally, that's where authentication happens, and that's already taken place. And you don't have to worry about the body, because the body itself is really only when you're pushing things into the system. So the query parameters is the only area you need to worry about in terms of filtering, but you don't have to use query parameters. If you just ask for projects, I think it'll give you 500 projects, unless you put in a limit of up to 5,000. So these parameters aren't required on a get. The only thing you really have to do is the method and the relative path, and that's it. So anytime you're getting stuff, whether it's one record or a list of records, nothing's totally required, but query parameters is what you want to use. And I'll show you an example of this in a moment. There are times when that relative path that you have needs to include a value. So instead of get project search, which gives you a list of projects, getting a project, for example, is only returning one. So you have to tell the system which project it is you're asking for. And notice on the last screen, when we were looking at this documentation on the developer site for the list of projects, you see how these items show like a question mark and then an ampersand? Those are query parameters. But in this case, when we're just trying to see a single project, it's not a query parameter because there's no question mark or ampersand in front of it. It wants it to be part of the path. And so it essentially wants to look like general ledger, V1, projects, and then the record ID of the project, 15, for example. You can also use a variable and input that. So if you're looping through a bunch of these, for example, or looping through a handful of these, you can pull a variable, or maybe someone was working in a Power App that is feeding this, and they're choosing which project that you're going to be working with. So that's how you can, make it a variable as opposed to just hard coding a value. But both of these options work that we're looking at below. All right. So for gets, only the body is provided as an output. This is going to make a little more sense when I do a demonstration in just a second. But a lot of times we'll just take that body and use it to do bulk inserts or other things. Or a lot of times, we're experienced enough on our team where we can kind of hard code or not hard code, but type in an expression of exactly which field we want. But if you're familiar at all with parse JSON, that is a component that can be used within Power Automate to take any output, to take any JSON body and better frame it to what you want to use. And so these next few pages provide some details if you're trying to do this on your own. If I've already kind of lost you and you're more interested in what the capabilities are than trying to do this on your own, again, our team is quite adept at helping get you started within your environment to take advantage of process automation within Financial Edge, give you the building blocks, and then you can take it from there and do it on your own. And so this next document, there's next page 2, which I'll show you a little more of this in just a moment, talks a little more about how to build out that parse JSON to get what you need. And we're highlighting on the right the differences in how you want to do it, if it's a single record or a list of records. Because going back a slide, if it's a list of records, we need to get to the value section of the body because it also has a count and other items. So that's what this is referring to if you were to try this on your own. And here's a screenshot of what that means. So when you choose a parse JSON after getting a list of projects, since the body is all that you're really getting out of it, you can just choose that body. But then, I use Control C and Control V to adjust that in the expression and just put value after it. So it'll give you that lower level to paste in what you want. That way you can actually see all the values within, something within your dynamic content, as opposed to having to kind of get to it and write the expressions to get to the field of the value that you want to get to. And last but not least is the ability to add information. So all the other slides are really focused on getting information. I'm going to show you an example as I jump over to the demonstration of also how to do a post and a patch once the patch starts working again. So now the difference is you're not using query parameters, you're using the body. And the body is actually where you're inputting what it is you want to post. In this case, we're going to create a new project together as a group during the demonstration. And you don't really have to understand and know how to perfectly formulate this output, this JSON output to put in there. That's where using that developer.blackbaud.com site is going to be so helpful, because you can kind of build it there by filling in the different values you want to load up, like project ID, description, status type, and it will create this for you. So then you can just paste that into the body as opposed to having to write all this yourself. So that's where using that as a test case can be really, really valuable. So for the sake of time, let me jump over to our flows. Let me hide these meeting controls at the top also.
And Barton, as you're doing that, I'm just going to take a pause here and just get a sense if folks have reactions, like, are you with us? Are you like totally lost? Like, feel free to use the little reaction things in Zoom and let us know how you're feeling.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions at this point too, if we have questions so far.
No questions have come in yet, so I'm going to assume. I'm seeing some thumbs up.
Thumbs up are good. Okay, so let's see this in action. We've got a number of flows, and this is within our little play sandbox. Typically, when we implement this for customers, we put this in their environment. So it'll be, within a nonprofits. So, they have it, and then we share it with a user or a couple of users at the organization so they can monitor the progress of these workflows and, see how each one has worked. Today, we're going to play around with this BB Dev Days HTTP flow, and I've already set up some of these, but I'm going to show you a few examples. So let's quick edit. And very quickly, I've kind of predefined a few things that we're grabbing. We're getting a bunch of projects. We're getting a single project. We're getting some accounts. We're getting GL transactions, getting invoices. But let's stay on this project topic for a moment and see kind of how we get to this and figure this out. Again, you want to start by going to Blackbaud, going into choose an operation. If you type Blackbaud, I've always found that's the easiest way to find it. And this is what you want, Blackbaud Sky add-ins, and then send an HTTP request. So the very first time you do this, it's going to ask you to authenticate. So that's really all it takes to get connected. Once you've got that connection in place and you can rename the header, it's always good to kind of explain to people what it is you're doing if someone else is looking at your work. And let's look at, if I can find the right page. the project section. So if you go to developer.blackbaud.com, you go to API reference, you go to general ledger, here's all the things that you can get to using this connection. Get in a list of accounts, get fiscal years, get budgets, or the one I'm using is get project search, which is another fancy way of saying, give me a list of projects. And even shows you kind of an output of what it may look like. But this is what's most critical is back at the top. This is what we want to paste in, everything up to that point. And then these are all of our optional query parameters. And you'll see it even says here, none are required components that you need. And clicking try it is going to be really valuable because it goes ahead and lays all these things out for you to see, if you want to limit, if you want to see what it takes to do a division or anything else, try it, see what the result is. Make sure it works here by first authenticating to your environment and clicking send. And then if you like what you're getting, you can take that same thing and paste it here. Notice too, Blackbaud went ahead and put this in as a message. It explains to you right away, don't do that API.sky section. Just put in everything after that, like constituents, D1 addresses. Or in this case, general ledger, V1 projects. I have only got a limit of 5,000, even though I only have like 20 records in the sample database. But that's really all it takes to get that going initially, to get that result. So that's all it takes to get a group of projects. We'll run this in a moment after we look at some other options. For getting a single project, you'll see this is where I embedded the ID 15 or even created a variable that tells it to pull the 15th project. Again, if we go back to our documentation, and if we go back to get project, you can somewhat tell that it's a necessity because it's required. So, and it doesn't have a question mark before it. So that, literally means it needs to be part of that path that you're embedding, in the solution itself. So with that, we're putting it, again, following that same mantra. And again, you can go test it to get what you need. You could either type 15 or the actual item you want to use, or if you're looping through or someone is feeding this to you, you can capture it within a variable and just drop it in. And that now is just giving you information about a single project. So there's no need to use any other parameters to determine, what it is you need or anything else like that. And so we did the same exercise to figure out, accounts that we want to get. I'm only asking for 5 accounts in this case using that limit feature, or getting transactions. And there's a connection point called transaction distributions. And what's good about this endpoint is that it's giving you transactions at the lowest level. So if you're splitting debits and credits across projects, across transaction codes or anything else, it's giving you that lowest level of distribution. And someone that taught me a lot about working with databases and reporting is you always want to start at that lowest level, because then we can roll things up by transaction, but we get a good representation of all the data. So using this, you can get every debit and credit at the lowest level that's ever been made since the beginning of time, or you can say, I only want to get journal entries that start with a certain date. And this one in particular is pretty flexible. It's all the way at the bottom of this list of APIs, and it's called transaction distribution list, not a transaction distribution set, which is like a saved version or a saved set of entries that you would reuse, but transaction distribution list. And within this, you've got so many different parameters you can put in here. You can filter on a project and just pull debits and credits connected to a project. You can filter on batch ID, which is the system record ID of the batch. UI batch ID, you can just pull transactions that have a journal code of journal entry or allocation. You can use from and to date, which is based on the post date of the journal entries. You can use like type code to only see debits and credits. That could be a little strange. I think typically you want all. Post status, we have some organizations that only want us to pull posted transactions into a data warehouse for reporting. We have others that want to know what the post status is, but include the unposted transactions. So you've got a lot of different ways to really filter down on the results that you want. And again, using Try It is a great tool to really get down to what it is you're looking for there. and then get invoices. So without further ado, let's run this and see some of these results. And then we'll go through an exercise to do a parse, and then we'll create a transaction. Now, again, I've got a small database, so all this runs quickly. But even if you've got a large database, you're only getting a collection of records. Sometimes when we pull, 1 million journal entry transactions for an organization to put it into the data warehouse, we're just looping through because we're only doing 5,000 at a time. So these calls are always very, very fast. And so when we go to get projects, here's a list of all 14 of our projects in this case, and all the information we need about those projects listed here in a nice way of output, an adjacent output. But our single project call, since we told it we wanted 15, only gave us the project that has a record ID of 15. And that's like the ID that you see across the top when you look at a project. So I think it's one of these, but it'd be the number you'd see here. That's the record ID of the project. Whereas this is what you would typically call the project ID. It's called the UI, or the user interface project ID. So if you only need one project or one account or one anything, to get this, the get project or get account is the option you want to use. Here's a list of all of our accounts that we pulled out. I've got 682 here. And then I'll just go to journal entries and move on. And then here's every journal entry that's been added in my sample database since January of this year. And we've got 40 that gives you the distribution amount. You also see a transaction amount, which you don't want to use when you start coalescing data if you're splitting transactions. So distribution amount is always safest. If we split a debit to 2 projects, for example, you'd be repeating if you showed the transaction amount versus the distribution amount. So this is all getting us output. One thing I like to do is, if you do want to kind of better parse out what it is you're looking at, and I'm going to open up another screen because I want to keep that run open. You'll see why in just a moment. And if I go back to edit this particular example, and let's say I got that list of projects, but now I want to do something with it. So instead of just getting a list that I'm going to bulk insert somewhere, I want to do something with it. Well, the challenge here is, if I use my handy compose, where we can just show anything, the only thing I can get from get projects is the body, right? So we need to kind of know how to get into all the things that are in that body, so to speak. So to accomplish that, you can use parse JSON. It's really useful if you're not familiar with it, especially as you're getting comfortable with new data sets. So if you use parse JSON, and JSON, if you're not familiar with that, it's just the output. It's the type of output that Blackbaud is providing for all these different components. So this is going to give us the ability to parse out that information. What's important here is we don't want the body, because the body also includes the count and some other stuff that we don't need. We just want this value section, everything in here. And so I'm even going to copy it because we're going to paste it in just a moment. Bracket to bracket, and I mentioned that in the PowerPoint. And we'll generate this from sample and paste it in. So we'll tell the system what our data looks like so it can build this out. And from here, what you need to do is you need to highlight this body, hit Control-C or copy and paste, however you do that. Go over to expression and paste it. And you always have to get rid of these little things on the front and the back, if you've ever tried copying and pasting a formula. And this is also in the PowerPoint, but you want to add the little section we're trying to get to. So the nested section we're trying to get to is value. So we want to get to the value section, not the count or anything else that we need to see. So it updates to that result. So now if you run this again, and this may produce an error. Sometimes it'll try to be smart to tell it what types of fields things are, or that a field can't be null or empty, and it is. And I'm actually anticipating an error, I think. So I'm just going to kind of, yep. All right, great. We get a message that it failed. This gives us a chance to troubleshoot this. So we're close, but something's not right. And it's saying that the type for properties type is not correct. Typically it tells us which type. We quickly edit this. And so there is a type field. Sorry. But I don't think that's the one we're referencing. But if you ever want to take out the kind of type, if it's not getting a value, you can. And so there's plenty of documentation on this when you're troubleshooting this parse JSON. I think the status was off too. But if you take out kind of the declaration of exactly what something is, then it'll be, more open and allow for anything, including nulls, which are empty values. Let me try this again and see if we can get it any further. And lo and behold, we got it to work this time. So what makes that valuable is that we've basically taken this pool and we've put it into something that we can now understand. And so what I mean by that is now that we've parsed this, and we could call it, parse project list, parse projects. Now, if I want to pull a value from this and let's say compose a value, now I see all of my stuff. So now I see, well, here's my project ID, here's my project description. And so you don't have to just know the expressions to write it. And so that's the real value of using parse, especially as you're getting more comfortable with Power Automate. Now, if I click on project ID, my screen's going to flip out because there's not just one, there's a collection of these items. Whereas if I had done this for single project, it would just give me that value in this compose statement, which is like a notepad. But in this case, it's going to literally set up and apply to each because I've got, 14 projects. And it'll give me the result of each of those here. So if I save this again and I run it, you're going to see it's going to take a little bit longer this time because it's going to have to iterate through each result and pull my values. It's got a little timer there where it's going through and thinking through this. Now, if I wanted to pull like the first item or something like that, I could have done that within a formula or use some other filtering to kind of group these together into an array. But now if I go into this, I can see each of my project IDs. And I should have done something like descriptions so you could see the actual items. But that's an example of using parse to just better understand what it is you're working with within Power Automate. So hopefully this is somewhat helpful. I do want to quickly take a moment to show you the ability to create a transaction. And so again, the best way to get into this, instead of using a get, we're going to use a post. And if we go back to our documentation, you'll see one that says post, post project. So again, the post, the get, the patch, Blackbaud's going to tell you which one to use based on what it's called. Post means create, patch means update, get means get or pull. So once I go to this post, it'll say, okay, in order to post, you really just need a body of what you want to include. And here's the required fields. You may have other required fields based on your environment. So that's where testing this out can be really valuable. And again, since you have to use a body and fill in this information of what you're posting in a very specific format, using this developer site to help you do it is going to be really helpful because it's giving you the body here. It's a sample body, but you can take out a lot of this stuff if you just want, say, the project name and other items. You can clean out some of the other pieces you don't want and just make sure the starting brackets go with the ending brackets. So if you just wanted project ID, description, and status and nothing else, then you could take out everything else and just have something that looks like that. Make sure you don't have an extra comma. So maybe some trial and error, but once you get what you want, you just want to take this after you test it here by clicking send and seeing the results. you just paste that into this section. And these could be variable. So instead of kind of hard coding this, they're coming from values that you've created or coming from an online form or something that was filled out as a starting point of a project that is a pending status. So that's really what it takes. The difference being you're not using query parameters to create something. You're using the body. And I love using this terminate feature. So I'm going to pull this down so we can actually create a record this time. I'm going to take out my apply to each just to speed things up a little bit. And let's hit test one last time. And we'll see what happens when we try to create a record, see if the system works with us. One of the benefits to using this Power Platform is how quickly you can manipulate these things and change as requirements change. And that's why I think a lot of the organizations we've helped get started with this really benefit from it. So you see, creating takes a bit longer. Instead of like 1 second to grab stuff, it doesn't feel like it took 16 seconds, but it says it did. So here's the information we put in. And it went ahead and created a record. You know, if you get an output of this, then you did great. If you get an output that says unable to save record, a field is required because you've specifically set up a specific field that's required in your environment, well, this API has to honor this. So any business rule, any required field you've got in place, that's all going to be maintained. So now if I go to my little sandbox environment, we'll see that new project that was just created, new project API 3. So that's an example of using those endpoints to not only pull data, but also push data to get into the system what it is you need. So with
Barton,
that,
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
I saw that URL that you were just at, right? So I'm guessing sometimes that it might be a little bit like hard to find that project, especially, well, so could you use a URL hack just to update the project number in that top URL that was reported?
Let me see. Yeah. So in other words, if you're trying to find that specific project that was just created.
Yep. Yeah. So we create.
Yeah.
We're in.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, one thing I do is like I'm sorting on date created over here.
Got it. Okay. So that makes
so
it
that's
easy.
how it popped up right at the top. But you're absolutely right. It told me in the end, it said that project was created and is number 24. So I could have typed in, a different number here, and that would take me directly to that value. So these are the system record IDs, which are different from the project ID, yeah, which you're used to seeing, even though it's called project ID in the API. And that's always something you have to wrap your head around. But great question. So again, if you want to download this presentation, please go to Lounge 2. Also, if you want to email me to learn a little more about this, or if we can help you get started with this process, or even answer some questions if you're trying to do it yourself, feel free to email me at barton.dyson@npAutomate.com. And with that, I'm going to stop share and see if I can answer any other questions.
I haven't seen anything else in the chat, so I think we'll give people, it's the 7 seconds of silence, right? Mm-hmm. Let's see if there's anything that comes in. All right, well, that gives everybody a couple minutes to take a quick break, and then we have our closing session on the and awards that start right at 4:30. So thanks everybody for participating today. I really appreciate it. We will have the recording available as soon as Zoom does its little thing. And thank you all for making it through this far. I know it's been a packed 3 days. Hopefully everybody has some great ideas and can leverage this all in the work that you're doing on a daily basis. So thank you all.
Great. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks so much. I had mentally shelved FE automation after I think it was probably your session last year where you created the connector to FE, right? I was like, okay, that's great, but I'm going to wait until there's something better.
Yeah, this is something
so
better.
Excited.
This is something better. So feel free to email me if I can answer any questions, Mari.
I appreciate it.
All right.
You have a good one. Bye.
Take care.